Emily, I want to go to the beach and feel the sea breeze. As I was busy preparing lunch in the kitchen, I immediately put down the spatula. Carol, the beach is too far from here and you haven't fully recovered yet. Can we wait until after lunch? I can take you to the community park for a walk. Before I could finish my sentence, Carol suddenly slammed the water cup onto the floor, the sound of glass shattering sharp and jarring. I said I want to go to the beach. No. Can't you understand me? I tried to keep my tone calm. Carol, the weather forecast says it might rain today. How about we make a different plan? She didn't listen at all. Grabbing a cushion from the sofa, she hurled it at me with full force. Seeing this, I could only sigh inwardly and say helplessly, "All right, we'll go now." But before I could even finish my sentence, I noticed Carol's gaze fixed on the kitchen. I immediately understood what she meant and reluctantly agreed. "Wait 10 more minutes, lunch is almost ready. We'll leave right after." She nodded in satisfaction, finally quieting down. A few minutes later, I helped her into a taxi. The driver, a kind man, got out of the car to help lift the wheelchair into the trunk, making sure not to jostle her. As soon as we got out of the car, the sun was blindingly hot, making it hard to open my eyes. Carol scoffed and mocked. "You didn't want to bring me out, did you? Saying it might rain, but the weather's perfect." I felt a knot form in my chest. I wanted to retort, but the words caught in my throat. I pushed her along the seaside path, the sunlight intense and the sea breeze a little salty. But after just a few steps, the sky suddenly changed. The clear sky was overtaken by dark clouds and soon thunder rumbled. My heart tightened. It was really going to rain. Before I could find a place to shelter, the rain came down in sheets, pouring like ink from the sky. Fortunately, I had an umbrella with me. I quickly opened it, holding it over Carol's head. But the wind was so strong the raindrops came from every direction, hitting us like bullets. I hurriedly took off my jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders and legs, calling out, "Hang in there," while pushing her toward the nearest shelter. We finally found refuge under the awning of a convenience store. I rushed inside, bought 2 towels, and the shopkeeper, seeing I was drenched, kindly handed me 2 cups of coffee. As I wiped Carol's face, I checked to see if she had gotten wet. Thankfully, she was still mostly dry. Just as I let out a sigh of relief, she suddenly erupted. "Emily, what kind of place did you bring me to? I want to go home. I want to go home right now." My heart sank, and despite being soaked to the bone, I had to calm her down, crouching down to speak softly to her. But she wouldn't listen, her voice growing louder. People in the store and the staff turned to look, some even casting sympathetic glances. I kept calling David, hoping he would come to pick us up. But no matter how many times I called, he didn't answer. Finally, when the rain stopped, my hair still dripping, I immediately pushed Carol to the curb and hailed a taxi to go home. The entire ordeal I pushed through gritted teeth. When we arrived home, I found David lazily lying on the living room couch, a few cans of beer and an open pizza box on the coffee table, the TV screen showing his favorite baseball game. My anger surged instantly, and just as I was about to question him about why he hadn't answered any of my 10 calls, Carol wheezed, pushing her wheelchair over to him first. "David, Emily doesn't want to take me out. She deliberately left me in the rain." Hearing this, I froze. This was pure manipulation. Just as I was about to explain, Carol suddenly raised her voice, accusing me of being heartless, continuing to insult me right in front of my face. David shot me a look, one that said, "Don't interrupt," and then silently wheeled his mother back to the bedroom. I stood there, feeling an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. Honestly, this wasn't the first time. A month ago, Carol had fallen at her house in Vermont. The doctor diagnosed a spinal fracture, and her recovery would take at least a year. During this time, she was advised not to lift heavy objects, bend excessively, or make any strenuous movements. After discussing it, we brought her to our home in New Jersey. To make it easier to care for her, I even took an extended leave from work. I originally thought it would be temporary, but little did I know this would mark the start of a nightmare. Over the past month, she complained about everything, from the food being too salty to the bathwater being too hot. Her constant, petty criticisms about every little thing were relentless. In the face of her complaints, I chose silence. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted to maintain peace for David's sake. But now it seemed all my patience meant nothing to her. It only emboldened her more. I was still replaying the storm from earlier when I heard footsteps at the door. David was back, clearly after settling his mother. I told her it might rain, but she insisted on going to the beach. When it started raining, she began complaining and wanted to go home. I called you several times, why didn't you answer? I bit back my anger. Why didn't you answer my calls? Sweetheart, don't take it too seriously. The company let us off early today. I wanted to watch a game in peace, so I put my phone on silent. You're not upset with me, are you? He said, coming closer with a tone that almost sounded like he was pouting. I stood there feeling helpless. The frustration, with no way to release it, just sank into the soft cushion of the couch. I could barely hold it in. After a moment, I spoke calmly. Sophie will be home from school soon. I'll go pick her up. You can throw the laundry in the washer. With that, I grabbed the car keys and left the house. Sophie, our 7-year-old daughter, was in first grade. Between caring for Carol, managing all the housework, and helping Sophie with her homework, I had no time to breathe. When we returned home, I told Sophie to go to her room to do her homework. Then I went into the laundry room to check on the washing machine. But when I opened the laundry room door, I couldn't believe my eyes. Water was overflowing from the washing machine, soaking the floor. Dirty clothes were scattered everywhere, and water was slowly creeping into the hallway. I was fuming. I rushed to the living room, found David, and said, my voice barely contained, "Didn't I ask you to put the clothes in the wash? You didn't even touch them, and now look at the laundry room." David stared at me, looking completely innocent, as if this had nothing to do with him. For the past 10 years I had done nearly all the housework. David never helped. I'd have to remind him 3 times just to take out the trash. But I wasn't willing to keep quiet anymore. Not this time. I wasn't his maid, nor was I his mother. I was his wife, a real woman with feelings. This time I was truly furious. After a few moments of silence, David slowly said, "Honey, I actually meant to do the laundry, but the washing machine suddenly broke." His words left me speechless. "Then why didn't you call someone to fix it right away? The laundry room looks like a disaster zone, clothes scattered everywhere. What do you expect me to do about it?" David shrugged, looking entirely innocent. "You know, I've always been the one handling things around here. But I honestly didn't know who to call." His expression, one of, "I'm not at fault, just clueless," completely drained me of any energy to argue further. I turned, ripped off the repairman's business card that had been stuck on the fridge for 2 years, and made the call for an appointment. At dinner, Carol continued to play the head of the house role, nitpicking at the food. "The chicken breast is too dry and the potatoes are too mushy. Emily, you really haven't improved at all with cooking." I could feel my emotions rising, almost ready to slam the dishes down and leave the table. But just then Sophie put down her fork and said with full seriousness, "Mom's cooking is the best in the world. I love the dinners Mom makes." The table went silent. Even Carol couldn't say anything for a moment. Her expression froze, her lips trembled slightly, and then she lowered her head to continue eating. I looked at her suddenly deflated face, a rare sense of satisfaction rising within me. It turned out sometimes it wasn't even necessary for me to speak. A single comment from my child could make everything clear. After dinner, Sophie pulled me into the study, asking me to help with her homework. I sat beside her, opened her textbook, and was about to think of where to start guiding her, when she asked me a question that stunned me. "Mom, is Dad teaming up with Grandma to bully you?" I was speechless, gently holding her little hand. "Sweetheart, why would you think that? Miss Susan said that families need to support each other." She bit her lip, her voice soft. "But Daddy never helps you. Every time Grandma throws a tantrum, he always sides with her, never with you." Her words felt like a small knife, ruthlessly cutting through the illusion I had been trying to maintain. I tried to stay calm, but not a single word of defense came to my lips. What could I say? That he was too busy with work? That Carol was old and needed care? But who would care for me? After getting Sophie into bed, I sat alone in the living room, my mind swirling with thoughts of David. We met at a friend's party. He had asked for my number that night, and he sat beside me the entire evening, acting warm and attentive. Then he started texting and calling frequently, checking in morning and night, even offering to drive me to and from work. He seemed like the ideal husband I had always dreamed of. Less than 6 months into dating, we were married. But after marriage, David became a completely different person. He no longer took initiative, stopped helping with housework, and when I was wronged outside, he would just dismiss it with a casual, "Don't overthink it." Carol, who used to be somewhat polite in front of others, completely changed once she moved in with us. Cold, sarcastic, and commanding. I felt like the only servant in the house, yet no one seemed to see anything wrong with it. Thinking about this, I couldn't help but feel that this marriage was like an ongoing one-person show that wouldn't end. When I returned to the bedroom, David was sound asleep, breathing steadily, his arm draped over his own face. Just as I was about to turn off the light, I saw his phone light up on the nightstand. First once, then twice, then a third time. It was already late at night. Who could possibly be messaging him this frequently? I had never snooped through his phone before. I always believed in trust in a marriage. But after everything that had happened recently, my trust had been completely worn down. I walked over silently and picked up his phone. On the screen was a conversation with his good friend, Jake. As I read through their chat, I was stunned to see David had gone into detail about how he deliberately broke the washing machine just to avoid doing housework, even going so far as to leave a pile of dirty clothes scattered in the laundry room. Jake's response made my blood boil to the point of suffocation. Bro, I just saw what you sent, it's genius. Emily must be totally under your control. I need to learn from you, that's next level. Reading those messages, my mind went blank and the rage inside me blazed like fire, almost burning away my last ounce of reason. Gritting my teeth, I took a screenshot of the conversation and then without hesitation hurled the phone at David. The impact of the phone woke him instantly, his eyes snapping open, his face filled with displeasure. But when he saw the phone on the floor, the screen still glowing, his expression shifted immediately from anger to embarrassment and guilt. David, what exactly are you doing? Have you and your friends been mocking me behind my back this whole time? My voice wasn't loud, but it was cold and cutting, slicing through the silence like a blade in the night air. I knew Sophie and Carol were probably waking up from the noise, but at that moment I didn't care. David stammered, trying to explain. Baby, listen to me, that's not what I meant. You misunderstood. He was frantic, unable to string his words together, but I didn't want to hear any more. Cut the act. The chat logs are right here. What else is there to argue about? I didn't marry you to be your and your mother's servant. We're done. I spoke calmly, but my words were resolute, unshakable. He tried to grab me, but I shook him off without hesitation and stormed toward Sophie's room. She was standing at the door, eavesdropping, her eyes filled with worry and concern. I picked her up in an instant and walked out of the house. It was already late at night, so I took her to a nearby budget hotel. Sophie sat on the bed, her eyes bright and understanding. She didn't cry, didn't ask a single question. I was about to say something to her when she spoke first. Mom, this bed is so soft and the room is so pretty. My heart ached. Her simple statement, so pretty, spoken so lightly, felt like a needle piercing through me. She wasn't oblivious, she just wanted to make me feel better. Sophie had always been sharp, even from a young age, seeing through our emotions. At that moment she quietly curled up under the covers. I gently tucked her in and gazed at her peaceful face as she slept, feeling an unprecedented sense of determination rise within me. The next morning I called Sophie's school and asked for a day off for her. Then I called Wendy from HR and told her I was ready to return to work. Wendy's reaction on the other end of the line was almost a jump for joy. Finally! You should know that your position has been vacant for months now, and I was starting to worry you'd get stuck at home and never come back. I smiled and replied, I'm free now. After hanging up, I realized there was still one more thing to handle. I had left in such a rush the night before that I hadn't grabbed Sophie's school bag, her uniform, or my own personal documents and extra clothes. So I dropped Sophie off at my friend Laura's house, then headed back to get our things. As I approached the door, I saw David standing on the steps. He spotted me immediately and hurried toward me. Emily, I saw your car outside the window and guessed you'd be back, so I've been waiting at the door for you. Seeing his sudden display of deep affection, I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh inside. Where was he all this time? I said coldly, I'm just here to grab our things, Sophie's and mine. Once I draft the divorce agreement, we'll take it to court. As soon as the words left my mouth, the color drained from his face and his eyes filled with panic. He quickly grabbed my arm, his voice trembling. Don't do this, Emily. Don't divorce me. Even if you don't think about me, think about Sophie. She's still so young. She needs a complete family. I swear I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes, just please don't leave me. At that moment, Carol slowly wheeled herself into the room. Her head was down, no longer the domineering old woman she used to be. Her voice was raspy and weak. "Emily, I know I was wrong. Please don't divorce him. I was too selfish. I promise I won't cause any more trouble." To be honest, I didn't really take Carol's words to heart. It was David's repeated pleas that caused a flicker of doubt inside me. I wasn't oblivious to what he meant, and I had considered Sophie. For her sake, I had tried to keep this family together. But I also knew that a simple promise of "I'll change" wasn't enough to support our future. "I'll consider divorce, but for now, I'm moving out with Sophie." I said this calmly but with an unwavering determination, then walked past them and headed straight into the house to start packing our things. It didn't take long before I came out with bags in hand and went straight to a real estate agent, where I rented a short-term apartment near downtown. Once everything was settled, I drove to Laura's house to pick up Sophie. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work. Sophie went to school and did her homework, and our life gradually returned to a more relaxed rhythm, calm but stable. However, not long after, it seemed David had found out our new address. Almost every evening he would bring food or household items and visit us. Considering he was still Sophie's father, I didn't stop him. I even allowed Sophie to spend time with him. He played puzzles with her, watched cartoons, and after she fell asleep he quietly cleaned the kitchen, tidied the living room, and sometimes folded the clothes on the balcony or took out the trash. This went on for a month. I saw it all and had to admit, David seemed to really be changing. I started to wonder if he could keep this up. Maybe I should give our marriage another chance. After all, for over a decade I had never asked for much, just someone to catch me when I could no longer hold myself up. So I decided to talk to him. I thought he'd show up as usual that evening, but when night fell he didn't come. Just as I was starting to doubt if he'd turned back into the same man I knew, my phone rang. Sure enough, it was David. "Emily, I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but the company sent me on an unexpected business trip for a few days. The caregiver I hired couldn't make it last minute. Can you come home and take care of my mom for just these few days? When I get back, I'll handle everything and won't trouble you again." I almost immediately agreed. Not because I still had feelings for him, but because I knew sometimes adults have to set aside their emotions and deal with reality first. After all, in our generation it was always about taking care of responsibilities before emotions. That evening, Sophie and I returned to the house we had temporarily left. The moment Carol saw me, it was as if she had seen a lifeline. She shakily stood up from her wheelchair, a long-lost smile spreading across her face. "Emily, you're finally back. This is wonderful." For the next 2 days I went about my routine, working during the day and returning home to prepare dinner for Carol in the evening, helping her move from the bed to the wheelchair and back again. But strangely, I didn't feel the same physical and mental exhaustion that I used to. Everything had become simpler. She no longer criticized my cooking for being too salty, nor did she bark orders at me. I gradually realized that the cold sarcasm she had thrown at me before was only intensified by my silent endurance. She picked at my flaws not because I had done something wrong but because she could tell I would tolerate it. I used to be the soft, pliable one. Now, with her son out of my life, she didn't have the same leverage over me. Honestly, these past few days I felt a sense of relief for the first time, not because Carol had changed but because I had finally learned not to take her words seriously. A few days later, as usual, I went to pick Sophie up from school. But the moment she walked out of the school building, I immediately sensed something was wrong. Usually she would excitedly run towards me and throw her arms around me, but today she walked slowly with her head down. My heart skipped a beat. I quickened my steps, closing the distance between us in 3 strides. Her face was unusually red, her eyes glazed over and beads of sweat formed on her forehead. I immediately reached out and touched her forehead. Her skin was burning hot. She was running a fever. I didn't hesitate for a second, pulling her into the car and speeding to the nearest children's hospital. After a long wait filled with blood tests and more waiting, nearly an hour later, Sophie was finally hooked up to N4. The doctor said it was just a regular viral cold, nothing serious, and I breathed a sigh of relief. As I was adjusting her blanket, a familiar figure at the end of the hospital corridor caught my attention. I squinted, wondering if I was seeing things. I quickly fumbled for my glasses, put them on, and once I could clearly see the person's face, my heart skipped a beat. It was David. And he was holding a woman tightly in his arms. I couldn't make out the woman's face at first, as her head was buried in David's chest, her shoulders trembling as if she was quietly crying. A few seconds later she slowly lifted her head, wiping her swollen eyes with a tissue. When I saw her face I froze in place. It was Jennifer, our neighbor from next door. She had been divorced for a few years, living alone with her son. We had seen each other a few times and were fairly familiar. I couldn't understand why David was here with her at the children's hospital, and why they appeared so close. Everything suddenly made sense. His business trips always seemed to conveniently miss critical moments at home. His last-minute overtime, I had believed. He had asked us to come help take care of his mom, but in reality he was here with another woman looking after her child. I lowered my head and noticed that Sophie was also staring in that direction, her little face pale, her expression confused. My anger surged, and the only thought in my mind was to march up and confront them. But just as I was about to take a step forward, a nurse walked by with a cart, preparing to change Sophie's for. My rational mind, like a splash of cold water, snapped me back from the edge of my emotions. If I confront them now and make a scene, it will only drag Sophie into this chaotic storm. I quickly pulled out my phone and snapped a few clear photos of the scene in the hallway. Then I saw them preparing to leave the room, and before they walked away, I overheard David comforting Jennifer, saying he had reserved a table at an upscale restaurant for her that night so she could relax. Hearing all of this, I clenched my fist, silently vowing that they would pay the price for their actions. Once I had managed to calm myself, I returned to Sophie's hospital room. After her four was finished, I took her back to our rented apartment. Once I had settled her in, I immediately rushed back to the hospital. This time I went straight to the pediatric ward. I wasn't wrong in my guess. Jennifer's son was in one of the rooms. When I pushed the door open, David and Jennifer weren't there, and the child was quietly lying in the bed. On the bed opposite, a middle-aged woman sat. She looked up as I entered and asked, "Are you here to see this child?" I nodded, answering calmly, "His mother is my neighbor." The woman sighed. "This child has pneumonia. He's been in the hospital for 3 days. His father is very responsible, staying with him day and night." At the mention of father, I almost laughed out loud. "He's not the child's father," I said coolly. "He's my husband." The woman looked up at me in shock. If it weren't for my daughter getting sick today, I wouldn't have known that his so-called business trip is actually to take care of another woman's child. These words fell like a stone into water, instantly sending ripples through the room. The room went silent, and after a few seconds the man in the bed next to mine put down his newspaper and peered over at me, his face full of shock. I calmly explained everything, even feeling a bit of enjoyment from their shocked gazes and whispered murmurs. After finishing, I gently tapped my bag, turned and walked out. As soon as I stepped out of the room, I immediately called David. The phone was quickly answered. Before I could speak, David hurriedly spoke from the other end. "Darling, it's been so chaotic these past few days. The company suddenly assigned me another project and I may not be able to get home for a few more days." His flustered tone sounded as if he were genuinely busy, but I was already immune to his last-minute business trip excuse. I didn't immediately confront him. I simply responded coldly, "Whoever's mother, whoever takes care of her." Then I hung up and blocked his number. I knew that before long news of David and Jennifer's affair would spread throughout this hospital. I didn't need to explain anything further. He would know that I knew everything. And this time I would not remain silent. He had to pay the price for his actions. In the past, I had considered keeping the family together because I wanted to give Sophie a complete home. But now she had witnessed firsthand how close he had gotten with another woman. He no longer deserved to be her father. The next morning, I went to a print shop and made several copies of the photos showing David and Jennifer in a close embrace at the hospital. I made sure to circle their faces in red so that everyone could clearly see who they were. I also paid for a giant banner. That morning, I carried the evidence back to the neighborhood where we had once lived. I posted the cleaned-up photos on every noticeable bulletin board and garage door in the neighborhood. Then I climbed a ladder and hung the banner between 2 large trees at the entrance of the community. The banner read boldly, "Honoring married man David Thompson for his tireless care of single mother Jennifer and her son, a true role model." For many years, I had a good reputation in this community. The neighbors had always been friendly with me, and no one had ever heard of me having a conflict with anyone. Now, when they saw these photos and the banner, Their first reaction wasn't gossip, but shock followed by pity and finally an unmistakable sense of disgust. They had once thought David was a responsible good man. Now they just felt sickened. And Jennifer? In their eyes she was nothing more than a homewrecker, a woman who had lost all sense of decency. I stood not far off, watching everything unfold with an eerie calmness. This was the exact outcome I wanted. Not out of revenge but to let them feel the sting of being surrounded by the collective scorn of others, of being talked about behind their backs. This was the real punishment. Not a shouting match but watching you lose all dignity as your image collapses. After all of this I returned to the apartment we were renting. Sure enough, it didn't take long before David showed up at my door. As soon as he walked in, he was seething with anger, shouting at me, "Emily, did you really have to make this such a big deal? Have you thought about me? Have you thought about our marriage?" His victim-like posture was laughable. I looked at him with a cold smile, my voice steady but sharp. "Marriage? When did you ever care about that? You can stop loving me but don't think I'm stupid. If you've done something wrong, you should expect to have your back stabbed. You'll soon be receiving the divorce papers from the court." My words were firm, without a trace of hesitation. David froze for a moment, then suddenly fell to his knees. "Emily, I was wrong. I swear I'll cut ties with her. Just give me one more chance. I can't lose you." The sincerity on his face almost made him seem like he was begging for his life. But I just coldly looked at him as though watching a performer. "You're not afraid of losing me. You're afraid of losing the tool who does your laundry, cooks your meals, takes care of your mom, and handles all the household chores." My tone was calm but more cutting than any shouting. With that, I slammed the door shut with a force that echoed through the frame, as if sealing the final fate of our marriage. Every word I spoke was from the deepest clarity in my heart. From the moment David chose to disregard the wrongs done to me and Sophie, from the moment he secretly entangled himself with Jennifer, I was no longer his wife in his eyes, but a tool to be used and manipulated. And when that tool refused to work any longer, he felt unease, anger, even fear, because he knew that no one in this home would ever blindly obey him again. But I wasn't a tool and I wasn't a fool. Once I saw the truth, I knew I would never turn back. Not long after, David officially received the court summons. I had in my possession irrefutable evidence of his affair, photos, texts, and recordings, enough to guarantee an absolute advantage in court. During the custody hearing for Sophie, the judge asked, "Who do you want to live with?" Without hesitation, Sophie answered, "I want to live with Mommy. I don't want to be with Daddy. He never cares about me." Her innocent yet resolute response made my eyes well up. In the end, the court ruled that Sophie would live with me and that all family assets would belong to me. The reason was clear: David's serious misconduct and his full responsibility for the breakdown of our marriage. As I walked out of the courthouse holding that divorce certificate in my hand, I felt an unprecedented sense of relief. Then I gathered all the records of David bragging in chats about how he deliberately broke the washing machine and how he manipulated my emotions. I sent those records to the wives of his married brothers. It wasn't for gossip, but to show more women like me who had been kept in the dark the true nature of their so-called husbands. Before long, I sold our old house. With the proceeds, I bought a 3-bedroom apartment with a study in a different community, and began a new life with Sophie. Every day I drove her to school in the morning, then came back home, made myself a cup of coffee, and read a book on the balcony. My life was like the surface of a lake, calm and vast. 6 months later it happened. That evening, David suddenly appeared at the door of my new home. As soon as he saw me, he immediately broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably, "Emily, let's remarry. I really know I was wrong. I haven't been able to live a single day in peace these past few months. I swear I'll be good to you and Sophie from now on." His voice was so loud it caught the attention of the neighbors, some of whom curiously opened their doors and peered outside. I was fed up with this lost soul turning over a new leaf act and coldly interrupted him. "David, we no longer have any relationship. If you don't leave right now, I'll call the police." Without hesitation, I took out my phone and prepared to dial. Seeing that I wasn't leaving any room for negotiation, his face drained of color, and he hurriedly turned and fled. The truth about David's situation had long been told to me by our neighbor Helen. After our divorce, he and Jennifer quickly got married. But it didn't take long for Jennifer to realize she had been completely deceived. She had thought that David would at least help her with the financial burden, but she soon discovered that he had practically nothing left. He was bankrupt. No house, no car, and nearly no money in his bank account. David ended up moving in with Carol and Jennifer, but things weren't going well. Jennifer quickly cracked under the pressure. David couldn't even contribute to the medical expenses for her son's continued treatment, a child who still suffered from the aftermath of the pneumonia. The cost of his monthly treatments was crushing. They began fighting constantly, and their arguments escalated into physical altercations. David even ended up in the hospital after Jennifer scratched him. But with no home and no support, he clung to Jennifer like a parasite, groveling to make ends meet. If Jennifer wasn't so overwhelmed, fearing the impact it would have on her son's recovery, she would have kicked him out long ago. David's current life was half self-inflicted, and the other half was crushed by harsh reality. As for David's mother, Carol, her situation was even more pitiful. Now that David couldn't even take care of himself, he had no way of continuing to care for his frail, elderly mother. In the end, he simply sent her back to her old house in Ohio. There wasn't even a regular caregiver there. It was said that her health continued to deteriorate, and her back injury worsened due to a lack of proper care. The doctor had once said that if she rested for 6 months, she might be able to stand again. But now that possibility was almost zero. Her life had completely become dependent on a wheelchair, and walking was an impossible dream. When Helen told me all this, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. If I had stayed in that house, the one to accompany David and Carol in their old age would have been me. I would have continued working and juggling caregiving, enduring that household's constant emotional blackmail and disregard. I was lucky that I woke up in time and stepped away. But since David had come all the way to my doorstep to put on his repentance performance, how could I miss this final goodbye show? I pulled up the security footage from outside my door and saved the video of him kneeling on the doorstep, tearfully begging for me to remarry. Then I uploaded the video to the community group chat where all our old neighbors were, with the caption, "Jennifer, please take care of your new husband. Don't let him come and bother me anymore." I could imagine, even through the phone screen, Jennifer's face twisting in anger as she read the message. She was already overwhelmed by David's true nature, and now, seeing him go crawling back to his ex-wife in such a pitiful way, her house would no doubt be filled with rage and chaos tonight. As I thought about it, a cold smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. After that brief laugh, I did something even more final. I left the community group. From that moment on, I no longer wanted to hear anything about David or Jennifer. No more contact, no more responses, no looking back. That chapter was completely closed. As for them, one a coward skilled in disguise, the other a greedy woman with poor judgment, they could remain tangled in their own schemes and resentments. That wasn't my life anymore, and it had nothing to do with me.